I didn't write to you before because I knew your illness might prevent you from comprehending the contents of my letter. I have now heard that you're closer to recovery and that your nervous condition has improved. I don't know what you've been told or what you even remember of the events that led you away. Signora Fosca died 3 days after the night you last saw one another. She died without knowing what took place between you and her cousin. The Colonel's wound was serious, but not mortal. He recovered in a few months. I wanted to speak to the Colonel about you in order to convince him of your innocence, but in the end, I was afraid I would hurt your cause more than help it. In a box that I'm sending, you will find papers that were left behind in your desk. Also, I'm enclosing some personal belongings of Signora Fosca and a letter she wrote you just prior to her death.
Welcome to Putting It Together, the podcast that goes through the entire body of work of Stephen Sondheim, show by show and song by song. My name is Kyle Marshall, your self-described Sondheim expert. Well, we have finally reached the end here of our Passion season. I know it's been a bit of a longer road than normal. Some weeks have been taken off as my personal life gets crazier and crazier and crazier, but I think we have a great final episode here for you today. It's a long one, so I don't want to belabor the point too much. So let's jump into our final episode of this season, the finale of Passion.
The time it is remote, isn't it? And
I'm filling up the room, our little room, with every flower in bloom. I'll have the fire lit, the table set, I'll wear the chandeliers.
Pompous little men,
this military
man, this uniforms.
Imagining your fingers touching mine, imagining our room.
Matt Koplik, thank you so much for coming back.
Oh my God, thank you for having me back, Kyle.
Passion. That is, of course, what we're here to discuss here today, our final episode of Passion. I want to hear from you what your relationship is with this show, because of all of the Sondheim shows and of all the people I've had on this season, this seems to be the one that you either lock in immediately or it's like it takes a while for you to kind of warm up to it.
Yeah, I don't mean to, it's not like I'm not necessarily conspiracy about this, but I do think it's interesting that I feel like all the Lapine Sondheim musicals kind of feel that way. Mm-hmm. Sunday, Passion, even Into the Woods. Like I know plenty of people who saw Into the Woods when it first opened on Broadway and did not register with it. And then years later they did. Passion for me, I feel like I talked about this once, if not on here, then definitely on my own podcast. But my grandmother, my mom's mom, used to work for Lincoln Center. And so she had to see everything that Lincoln Center Theater produced. This was one of the things. This was a commercial production that Lincoln Center was a co-producer on with Scott Rudin. And she had to go see it. And she hated it so much that everyone involved with Passion basically was on her shit list for the rest of time. Even Donna Murphy, who famously, had this career best performance in Wonderful Town at Encores that moved to Broadway. My grandmother still would not get into it because she just had such a dislike for Passion. So I grew up hearing about this quote unquote Passion musical and just how insufferable it was. And oh my God, why would anyone put themselves through watching that? And so I avoided it for a very long time. And then I don't think I actually watched it until college because every year in school, a girl was assigned to do Loving You. And also when I was in school, that's when Finishing the Hat came out. And then I think a year later was Look, I Made a Hat. Right. So I was before I graduated, it had come out. So I read through it and I finally watched it and then listened to it. And I definitely wasn't in love with it, but I did not have the same reaction as my grandmother. I wasn't like, Donna Murphy, cancel her forever. I was like, there's something here. It's just not my favorite. But I had enough friends who loved it that it always kind of was in the conversation. And I remember when the Donmar production was happening in London, there was talk about that. And then when Classic Stage Company did it. And so I always kind of would come back to it every 2 or 3 years and every time I liked it a little bit more. And I was telling you off mic a little bit, but I'll say it for the listeners here. It's still not a show that I fully love. Like, it's not up there with Follies for me or Sweeney Todd for me. But similar to Sunday, because of certain experiences I've now had, I understand this show a lot more. And I understand the sort of, I don't want to call it two-facedness, but the multiple ways you can interpret this musical, and especially the finale, which I know we'll be talking about. But that's, never got to do the show, never got to see it live.
I was going to ask if you've seen any of the revivals.
No, I was tempted to see it at Classic Stage Company because my beloved Kunze was Fosca in it, but that show was so sold out at the time that if you didn't have a ticket immediately, you weren't getting a ticket. And then there was illness in the cast, so they were canceling performances and rescheduling performances. And so it was just, there was no way for me to get in to see it, which I regret. And I know some people who loved it and some people who hated it, which is par for the course for passion. But I am now familiar with the recordings of the original Broadway company and the Classic Stage. And I've watched, of course, the Donna version. And then I've watched a bootleg of the Kennedy Center production from the Sondheim Festival. So it's like, it's I can't say that I'm an expert, but I'm not flying totally blind here.
No. So for you, I guess your roadblock to it, was it primarily plot or was it character or music? Like, what was it, do you think, that was like the thing that prevented you from being like, oh, this is one of the best?
I couldn't tell you. I think now that I sort of look back on it, I don't know if the video of the original production should have been my entryway to it. Because I don't love the original production. It's very, beautiful to look at, but very cold. And Donna Murphy is giving an astounding, star turn, but it also kind of throws the dynamics of the story for me. And I also know that this is something that Sondheim has said as well, and I'm sure we'll get to that as we talk about the finale, because when I watched the Kennedy Center version, and then I was listening to the Classic Stage Company version, I was like, why is this landing better for me than the original? Because Donna is so undeniable as Fosca. She's iconic. Everyone associates her with Fosca. But, I love my Kunze, but it's not quite the star turn as Fosca as Donna is. And I do think that ultimately is to the betterment of the material. So I just think that something about the original production turned me off because it was so cold. I found it very cold, and I found it very... pretentious is the wrong word, but a little overly serious. And that's something that I know people have complained about the show, and sometimes complained. There is humor in this. And I think because it goes to such extremes of melodrama, you do need a little bit of humor to cut the tension. And the original production didn't want to do that at all. And I can imagine being uncomfortable and sort of feeling like confined by the rigidity of Lapine wanting it to be just like such a serious piece. I think that's sort of what did it. It wasn't music, it wasn't story. Although, I mean, it is music that has probably taken me the longest to grab onto. I think, actually, no, I'm sort of undermining myself here. Ultimately, the thing that broke through for me that then got me to like it more in other recordings was weirdly, it is the original cast still, but the Tony performance.
Right. Yeah.
And it is actually the finale that did it. It was because they do the finale at the end of the Tony performance. And something about how that finale was done, I was like, oh, when I don't have 2 hours of darkness leading up to it, like there's beautiful music in this finale. Which allowed me to kind of pick and choose certain songs and find music that I gravitated towards. And then through later recordings and videos, I was able to find my way in. And again, not being obsessed with it, but appreciating it and enjoying it more.
Yeah, I mean, one of the benefits of doing this show is that it forces me to do increasingly more deep dives into the material. And I think for me, because I'm similar to you in that it took me a while to like fully like embrace this show. I always liked the music, but it was hard for me to like really make sense of the themes and the characters. I think the older I get, the more I lock in. And interestingly enough, I've always kind of understood Fosca's point of view as like overbearing as she becomes. I was like, I get it. I get it from her backstory and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think the two things for me that have kind of unlocked it here over the past few months is, number one, the reiteration by Sondheim and others that this is really one long song that you're supposed to be experiencing. And secondly, hilariously, in my opinion, because both the creators didn't realize this until after that original production closed, is that as much as like the original book is called Fosca, and Fosca is kind of the character you come away from this thinking about the most, the story itself is Giorgio's story. Like, it's him that goes through the change. So if you don't lock in with that, or you don't have an actor that can fully encompass his like highs and lows, I think it kind of falls apart a little bit.
Yeah, it's so funny because what ultimately drew Sondheim to the piece to make it a musical was the arc of Giorgio falling in love with Fosca.
Right.
And then I don't know what exactly happened. I know that Jerry Shea, who does a very nice job in the original production, was not who they originally were going to have. They had Peter Gallagher in the workshop.
Right.
And Jerry was the better, and Peter couldn't do it. He had other film commitments because he was a movie star.
Yeah.
And the general thinking was that Jerry was the better singer, Peter was the better actor, and that this show sounded better with Jerry, but it made more sense with Peter. Something happened with Broadway and the reception were like, because Donna was, even though Fosca was such a polarizing character, her performance was one that just everyone was talking about. It feels like they sort of lost sight of Giorgio with all of that. When you're being told like, this is the thing that keeps working, like zero in on this, like you're going to do it. And I know Sondheim said, I can't find the interview, but he has an interview where he talked about the Donmar Warehouse production, where he said that David Thaxton as Giorgio, it was focused on him and it made the whole show fall into place in a way he never realized before.
And there's no video of this performance, unfortunately, so there's no way.
Yeah, there's audio. There's audio of it,
yeah.
but there's no video. And it's also funny enough. It's Elena Rogers Fosca, and Jamie Lloyd is the director. And so I'm like, oh, so were there cameras? Was it a black hallway? But this was Jamie Lloyd before he became super Lloydian. But what Sondheim said was like, it was a beautiful production, but it was very simple, and its elegance was in its simplicity. There was also like a bit of a scariness about it because there was a lot of shadows and frosted mirrors, and the finale wasn't this like wholesome, moving, oh yes, love finale. It was like kind of sad and scary because you watched David Thaxton as Giorgio become a shell of a human. And he was like, the whole thing just sort of worked in a way that James and I had never really intended. And it like made him realize what they actually had, and then sort of embarrassed him that like 16 years later, he finally realized what his show was.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but I wish I could find this interview because I can't find it anywhere. And I know I'm not making this up because I feel like so many of us have spoken about it.
No. I think it does exist. I thought it was weird when Saxton halfway through this ran out and followed by a camera out into the street beside the theater, though, in Passion. It was a bold directing choice.
Absolutely. It was very bold during Is This What You Call Love, or whatever that song is. He just went into the street and went up to numerous strangers with a camera on him and shook them. Yeah, with a cardboard cutout of Sondheim.
Hi everyone, just Kyle breaking into the conversation to tell you about some of the people that help this show continue to go. If you'd like to help support the show for absolutely free, you can give a rating and review on whatever app you listen to podcasts in. That's of course greatly appreciated. Putting It Together is an independent podcast, so if you'd like to help monetarily, which will only help to grow and make this show better, you can do so over at our Patreon page. Please do not donate if it impacts you negatively financially. I would like to give a shout out to Talmadge, our newest member over on Patreon, so thank you so much for joining the group over there. I also need to give a huge thanks to the God That's Good tier from Patreon of Alex, Perry, Christopher, David, Jack, Luis, Michael, Mika, Robert, Stephen, and Whitty. All right, let's get back to the show. Okay, so what are we talking about here today?
We are talking about the finale, the grand finale of Passion.
So this is kind of hilarious as we're now here at the final song of this show. But if you can recall, what is happening like just right before the finale starts?
Giorgio and Fosca's cousin have a duel. Then I think it's like the night after Giorgio has slept with Fosca, right?
Yes.
Something like that. Yeah,
very, very shortly after.
Yes. And so he's challenged to a duel by Fosca's cousin, and They take their paces. Giorgio shoots, and he does hit the general. But although we find out he doesn't die, but Giorgio has like on the spot has a breakdown, and we cut and flash forward a couple of months later, and Giorgio is in what I'm assuming is a sanitarium,
some sort of hospital for sure.
Exactly, and receives a letter from the doctor who informs him, Fosca died, 2 days later after your duel, and she had no idea that your duel happened. But before she did die, she wanted me to write a letter for you. And here's the letter and a box of her things. By the way, the general was not mortally wounded. He is recovering. He's expected to make a full recovery shortly, or he already has made a full recovery. And that's sort of it. And then Giorgio, and as he's getting the box and the items as we head into the finale, fragments of the show start sort of swimming in his head. And we get this sort of counterpoint overlap of different elements of the score that we've heard all night before we get to Fosca's letter. And that is everything that's leading up to the meat of this finale.
Right. So two things. Number one, have you ever seen the Italian movie that convinced Sondheim to make this into a musical?
I have. It's been a few years, but I think it's on YouTube still.
It is on YouTube, so people can go and watch it if they want to. And actually a pretty good transfer, to be perfectly honest. I was just going to say, the scream that Giorgio does in that movie is so like ear piercing. Like he goes so high in it. It's like the one part of that movie that is like stuck in my mind of like how much of his breakdown is just like him screaming his head off.
Well, I think it's because Sondheim said in the movie, and then what he wanted to translate into the show is that scream was supposed to sound like Fosca's scream.
Right.
And that they could never get it right on stage.
Yeah, that's something that's a little bit easier to do in movie trickery. This is the recurring question I've been asking so many of our guests. So I'm going to ask you the same question. And I do think that other people have written in with good analysis of this. But is the Doctor character. What is your read on the Doctor character? Because for me, what has been interesting, like from reading the novel, watching the movie, doing the deep dive here, through all of the different iterations of this story, the Doctor to me feels like he's not outright the villain, but there's something going on with this character who seems to be pulling strings in the background that's never like fully revealed.
Yeah, I wouldn't know. I don't know if I would call him a villain because I don't think anything he's doing is with malicious intent. I think I don't know. So I also, full disclosure, I did do an episode on passion for my podcast. I actually did two. I did one when we did our first Sondheim series, and then again, I want to say back in like October, November.
It was fairly recently, I think.
Yeah, it was part of the what did I call it? Grab bag, the grab bag series.
Yeah, you pulled the name out of the hat.
Yeah, so yeah, pulling things out of a bowl, and that was one that got picked. And so I did it again, and we talked about the show, and I think we talked about the Doctor a little bit, but we didn't talk about him much because ultimately doesn't really. It's less that he does stuff that forces the story to happen, and more that if it weren't for the Doctor, everything that happens in the story would happen a lot slower. It's sort of he's the foot on the pedal that accelerates everything. I'm not entirely sure what his reason is, other than the fact that he's there to care for Fosca, right? Like that's the only reason he's there. And so everything he does sort of comes from the viewpoint of I have to help my patient, and if my patient's getting worse, and the only thing that could possibly help her is to have you sit by her bed and write her a fake letter, you're gonna do it. The worst.
It's almost like an experiment for him. That's kind of what I keep coming back to. It's like he's observing this relationship as one would like a medical trial or something like that. Like let's see what happens.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to know that there are really great doctors who make bad decisions in good faith, and then there are people who should never have been doctors.
Right.
And I think you can decide for yourself, and as an actor, you can play it yourself of, is this someone who is a good doctor who's playing a very, very dangerous experiment in the hopes that it yields good results, or is this someone who should never have gone into this position and is far too emotional? Like, is this an Izzy Stevens from Grey's Anatomy situation, right? For my Grey's Anatomy fans out there, or this my people who don't know Grey's Anatomy, Izzy is Katherine Heigl, who every doctor on that show has like their big flaw. Sandra Oh is that she's far too cold and she's got terrible bedside manners. Izzy's is that she gets far too involved with her patients' personal lives,
right? And
she cares too much. And so I wonder if like this is a doctor who simply just quote unquote cares too much about Fosca, and by caring too much about Fosca, he's ruining Giorgio.
Yeah, yes, like something like that. It's so interesting. What's even more fascinating, which I did not know until literally this morning, because there's a small game I want to play at the end of this episode, but Tom Aldridge, who plays the Doctor, gets a Tony nomination out of this, which I think is such a fascinating nomination for a person that never gets a song. He probably sings in like the ensemble at some points, but like for best featured actor in a musical to not sing seems like not a very common occurrence.
It's not common. It was a weird year.
That's a weird year too, I should just point out.
That was a year that was pretty much dominated by revivals, Beauty and the Beast and Angels in America. And yeah, like I'm trying to think of who else could have gotten in over him from other shows. And the best I can come up with is like maybe Burke Moses as Gaston in Beauty and the Beast, maybe.
Yeah.
Or another baseball player in Damn Yankees, or like, well, I guess maybe Howard McGillen and She Loves Me. That would have been a solid alternative. Yeah, but it is rare for someone in a musical to not sing at all and still get nominated. I mean, I'm trying to think of like cases where that happened. I don't know New Girl in Town well enough, but I feel like Thelma Ritter never sang in that show.
Sure.
You don't hire Thelma Ritter to sing.
That's the number one thing. Okay, well, you set it up here fairly well. And as you said, we're going to essentially get a series of reprisals of stuff we've already heard in this show. So we get some of the soldiers to come back on to sing, "The town, it is remote, isn't it? And provincial, don't you think?" I should also point out that a lot of this is overlapping one another.
Yeah.
Clara is singing, "I'm filling up our little room, with every flower in bloom. I'll have the fire lit, table set. I'll wear the blue chemise." Ludovic is singing, "The time has come to face the truth, Signorina." The attendants, "This sterile little town, these pompous little men." Some other soldiers, military madness. Uniforms. And then Clara again, "Imagining your fingers touching mine, imagining a room, the bed, the secrecy, the world outside, your mouth to mine. An unattractive woman." Oh, sorry. And the Colonel is singing, "An unattractive woman is easily deceived."
The town, it is remote, isn't it? And provincial.
I'm filling up our room, our secret room, with every flower in bloom.
The time has come to
fire
face the
table
truth,
set,
Signorina.
where the
This
sterile little town
These pompous little men.
This military madness. Uniforms.
Imagining your fingers touching mine. Imagining a room, the bed, the secrecy, the world outside, your mouth on mine.
What is the cost of a few words when a life hangs in the balance?
Well, first of all, it's interesting that the first lyrics are the soldiers in their repeat of Fosca's words. This is a regurgitation of a reprise, and so the first words swimming in Giorgio's heads are actually those of Fosca's, but of other people singing them. It's very much giving the end of Follies as we head out of Live, Laugh, Love and go into the final scene. But that is because for those of you who only know Follies from like the original cast recording or the Avery Fisher Hall concert, in a normal production of Follies, when Live, Laugh, Love falls apart in Loveland, what then happens is there's like a 30-second section where like 8 different songs that we've heard throughout the night are all sung on top of each other, but that's supposed to be a regurgitation. The idea is like musical is throwing up the score at the end.
Yeah.
And this is more of thought sort of swimming, specific thoughts that don't really have anything to do with the central issue of Giorgio or like even the most important things that he's heard from Fosca. It's just sort of or Clara or Fosca's cousin. It's just sort of everything is swimming in his head before he zeroes in on the letter. So yeah, none of these lyrics hold weight in sense of like, ooh, what does each one mean and why is this one being repeated? It's more that
just this thing that's been swirling around in his head this entire time.
It's sometimes random things stick with you, and it's not that it holds any weight. It's just like, I weirdly remember that thing somebody said that day. Especially when you're in a foggy state like Giorgio is right now.
I will say, I've said this before, for whatever reason, that uniforms is a thing that gets stuck in my head all the time. I don't know why it is, but I'll be walking around the house and it's like uniforms. Yeah.
I mean, I think because it's what starts this, but I always have the town, it is remote, isn't it? And cathedrals. Yeah, it's like that's just it's and provincial. It's for some reason that's just stuck in my head all the time. I couldn't tell you why. Yeah, I don't know. Certain, like for a show that doesn't have a lot of quote unquote melodies to it, there are just certain passages that are stuck in my head, and I couldn't tell you why.
they just get stuck there.
Mm-hmm.
So after all of this like swirling of emotions and past events, Giorgio gets down to business here. He picks up Fosca's letter and opens it and starts to read. And so the music continues, but he reads, "My dearest Giorgio, the end is near. The time has come for me to surrender life gracefully. These past 2 days since you have left, since we were together, have been a revelation." And then he starts to sing, "Now at last I see what comes from feeling loved. Strange how merely feeling loved you see things clearly." And then Fosca's voice kind of comes in and joins his. "Things I feared, like the world itself, I now love dearly. I want to live, now I want to live, just from being loved."
Now at last I see what comes from feeling loved. Strange how merely feeling loved you see things clearly. Things I feared like the world itself, I now love dearly. I want to live, now I want to live, just from being loved.
Well, so first of all, we'll get to the next passage, but I think there's one passage in this letter that is the only bit of new music in the finale. Yeah. I'm pretty sure, because this part that we just read, that's derived from "Loving You," right?
Correct. Yes, it's been we've heard this in the past. Yeah.
Yes. So I'm sure you've spoken about Fosca a lot on every episode. I've full disclosure, I've only listened to 4 of the Passion episodes.
Okay, that's fair.
I listened to Happiness. I listened to one of the letters. I listened to. I listened to I Read. But I specifically didn't want to listen to I Wish I Could Forget You because it's such an important part of this finale. And I was like, I don't want to hear what Kyle has to say about this song because I want to come at it straight. Yeah. But when you speak of Fosca on this podcast for the other episodes, how have you sort of described her as a person?
I think. So there's been different interpretations. I'll just say that straight up. I'll speak for myself, who this is a woman who has been burned in the past. And now because she has only lived, or because of her lived experience, she has a very specific idea of what like love is and how love is used. And I think that she is very similar, and this is how I've described it in the past, is very similar to when someone becomes like super in love with like an online personality, like they think they have a relationship. Parasocial, thank you. That is to me how this relationship with Giorgio starts. It's such a parasocial relationship where she thinks and she's imprinting on him. And it's like, no, you do love me. Yeah. And you're going to love me because I just know this is going to work. So she becomes like this maniac through most of it. But the wild thing is that she's kind of right at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the nuance of the show that I appreciate. I think that no character is fully right. Every character comes at, because like ultimately, what is love, right? It's not really an intellectual thing. It's a feeling, and you could try to break it down to a chemical response, and it's pheromones and all these things. But it's also this very intoxicating high that you get, but also in the word intoxicating is toxic. And that's sort of an important thing to recognize. Fosca for me has always been a miserable person.
Yeah. I mean, she's like the exact opposite, right, of Clara, right? Clara, it is such a physical relationship that her and Giorgio has, and that's what the basis of their love is. Whereas it's like this intellectual passion that's going on with her and Giorgio, which only becomes physical at the very end.
Yeah,
but she is miserable.
With Clara and Giorgio, it's actually a very egotistical kind of love because it's 2 beautiful people having very good sex, and it's more of I love you and my love for you makes me feel better. And so I keep wanting to love you because I love the high I get from being in love with you. And Fosca, I made a joke about this with Passion once a long time ago, of like, it took Sondheim 40 years to write another uber romantic lyric since West Side Story. And his solution to it was, I love you so much and it's killing me. Like, I hate how it makes me feel. And I get that.
Giorgio and Fosca at moments have this where they try to intellectualize what love is, but love can't be. Really, at the end of the day, it is such an emotion that becomes so all-encompassing that it doesn't make sense at the end of the day.
It has no real solid definition because it's so different. It takes on different forms. It takes on different energies, and you see different relationships with people where, like, you could argue that what they have is love, but what kind of love is that? And is that a healthy love? Is that a sustainable love? And as I'm sure everyone has said on the podcast, like, the show is not called love; it is called passion. Clara and Fosca have a different kind of passion for Giorgio. Clara's is ebullient and joyful, and again, like, very much about how it makes her feel, and Fosca's is desperate and unassuming, and just like it has no ego behind it. I'm not proud of how I am right now with you. I'm not proud that I love you. I just do. And like, I don't. And for someone like Fosca, who again is miserable, has led a very miserable life and has had nothing but pain, has nothing but trauma, has also been traumatized by people around her. I think it's sort of when you find some kind of glimmer of light in your life after a sea of darkness, you hold on to it for as much as you can. And someone like her, that translates to stalker, that translates to crossing all sorts of boundaries. She's also incredibly smart. She's incredibly cynical. And I feel like she sort of tests everyone's patience, right? We see all these movies, right, of the quote unquote ugly duckling with the heart of gold, who's also very smart, and you fall in love with her personality. And it's like, no, Giorgio doesn't fall in love with her personality because her personality is also kind of awful. When they're walking through the ruins and he's like, you could do more with your life, like give to others. And I just love the way Kunze goes, give to others. Like she's like, I went to a poorhouse once to help out. It did nothing for me. And like she's over all of it. And she's self-pitying, I bring all this up because in the letter, because all of the show is she loves him, and she's not even telling him, I'm gonna make you love me. It's just a constant stream of like, I love you, love you, and by the end he says, I love you back, and in a way that it doesn't feel placating, it feels genuine. But how that ends up affecting him is another story. But so the letter she gives him is sort of, for all of the things that she's done to Giorgio and how Giorgio is now, Fosca dies with peace and with actual hope. She says the irony is that now that I am dying, I actually want to live. Right. Because having had you love me makes me see the whole world differently, because she walked around with this cloud over her head because she thought that she was just so unlovable. She grew up being told one thing by her parents. The world then responded differently and keeps responding to her in some way. And you can only be kicked so many times before you start to think, I'm someone who deserves to be kicked. And which then translates into how she loves Giorgio. Like, I love you, and it's okay if you don't love me back. Kick me. That's what I know and expect anyway. But like, I love you. And when she dies with this letter, it becomes, oh no, I don't deserve to be kicked. I deserve to be loved, and you taught me that, and I get to. And even though I want to live, I will now die with that inside of me, and that gives me calm. That gives me peace, and I'm a much more whole person now because of what you've given me.
I mean, this is, I think, again, is the crux of the entire piece, right back to the original book, because she is described as ugly and other people talk about her that way. It's just a fundamentally different thing of like, yes, her and Giorgio, at least through the text, emotionally are the right match for each other. But there isn't that physical attraction at the very beginning. That just isn't there, which would be very different if she was like Michelle Pfeiffer circa 1990. You know what I mean? It'd be like, oh, well, she's a little mean, but like, I can get over that. Like, but that's why this is such an interesting thing to examine.
I don't mean to sound like a Fosca myself, but it is wild how much we let people we find attractive get away with.
For sure. Yeah.
and not even just like awful behavior, but just so many people who are boring with no personality. And people will tell them that they have it because they find them hot. There's that great 30 Rock episode when Liz won't do deal breakers and Jack is going to do deal breakers with Padma Lakshmi, and because she's so beautiful, she's like, I'm very funny. Have you heard this joke? Knock knock. And he just starts laughing, goes, what a great joke that was. Like, and she didn't even do the punchline, right? It's how many people in our lives have we given so much leeway for because we found them attractive,
right?
And ultimately because we wanted them to say they liked us or have sex with us, because if someone attractive, is willing to sleep with me or say they like me, clearly that means I have some value now,
right? Yeah.
And you could argue that, like, what does Fosca know of Giorgio when she starts to fall for him, other than the fact that he's handsome and reads books? Yeah, she's like, I saw how you spoke to your men, and that showed me that you were a good, smart and kind person. I'm like, you saw him for 5 seconds give a command.
Yeah, like, you know nothing about this person.
Yeah, she's ultimately as shallow as everyone else, because what she likes about Giorgio is that he's handsome, and she thinks that the world's out to get her because she's not attractive. And Giorgio does say to her, like, yes, you're not attractive, but also you're like a revolting human being. You're loud, you're obnoxious, you're mean, and he finds her pathetic for so long. The show kind of keeps challenging us that way, and sometimes says, and finishing, oh look, I made a hat. We allow Glenn Close to be iconic in Fatal Attraction because she looks like that.
Exactly,
and yet Fosca does a lot of the same stuff, minus kidnapping a child, minus boiling a rabbit alive. And people are like, my God, leave her in the rain to die.
Yeah, like, kill her now.
Yeah, die, Fosca.
I mean, honestly, it reminds me of that quote from The Big Lebowski, which is like, you're not wrong, but you're still an asshole about it, right?
It's I think with Fosca in this number, it draws parallels to Carousel in the sense of, like, you can be sort of a leech in this world, right? And just sort of suck the energy from people around you, but you can still be redeemed. And how you find that redemption is your journey and not up to us to judge. But, like, if you can die having become slightly better, that gives us hope for, any sense of humanity. And Fosca spends the whole show being miserable and being, again, sort of repulsive. And we learn right before she died, like, she actually found inner peace and a sense of calm and joy. And that, I think that allows us to find hope in ourselves in some slight way.
So Fosca continues on saying, all that pain I nursed inside for all those years. And Giorgio says, all that vain and bitter self-concern. And they both come together. All those tears and all that pride have vanished into air. I don't want to leave. Now that I am loved, I don't want to leave.
All that pain I nursed inside for all those years.
All that vain and bitter self-concern. All those tears and all that pride have vanished into air.
I don't want to leave.
Now that I am loved,
I don't want to leave. Everywhere I turn.
The other recurring question I've been having, or that I've been asking, I guess, how do you personally view these letters? Giorgio was reading this letter, obviously, from something that Fosca wrote. Her part, is that literally how she wrote the letter, or is that him imagining how she wrote the letter?
You mean, like, is the music that's being sung, is that Giorgio's interpretation of what she's writing, or is that Sondheim saying, like, no, this is the feeling behind the letter?
Correct. Yeah. Is this, like, literally how she was writing the letter, or is this just Giorgio's imagining of how she wrote the letter?
I'm going to say the former, and I'm sure there's an argument to be made for the latter. It's everyone in passion puts their feelings on their sleeve, and I would imagine that this is no different. I mean, it could also, there's so many things to sort of talk about, and it won't make any kind of sense to anybody because my brain is all scattered with this, but, like, Sondheim talked about how, in a weird way in the movie, and they couldn't really figure it out for the show, by the end, Giorgio kind of looks like Fosca 2.0. He's pale, he's sickly,
right.
he definitely is dying, and it's a that is parallel to the novelist who wrote it, because he died of
before he could
tuberculosis
finish it. Yeah.
exactly, and wrote in his letter to his friend, who I think finished the novel for him, saying, because it's all inspired by his real life love affair with a woman named Clara, and then another woman who was suffering from epilepsy. And he said about the latter, I fear she's bringing me to my grave. And ultimately, he sort of becomes just like her, because even though she does love him and he loves her in his own way, she has sort of consumed him fully in a way that is not beautiful, in a way that is very ugly and sick. So in a way, I feel like because Giorgio is now sort of one with Fosca, even if this is his interpretation of her letter, it's probably correct, because she lives on in him now. Like we'll get to the final line of like, your love will live in me, but it's like as long as Giorgio is still on this earth, Fosca lives, because like her alien egg is hatched inside of him, and the toxic and intoxicating is pumping through his veins.
Yeah, there was kind of like that transfer of the sickness almost to him, right?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is a very, I know this was written in Italy, not in the UK, but it's such a Victorian thing. If you're in a Victorian lit, it's like, someone's like mental capabilities are like transferable to other people, or like their sicknesses are transferable to other people. And that shows like a moral failing in some cases, depending on the novelist. But
yeah.
Okay, so they both continue on going, everywhere I turn, you are there. Everywhere I look, things are different. Everything seems right. Everything seems possible. Every moment bursts with feeling. Why is love so easy to give and so hard to receive? And then Fosca says, but though I want to live, I now can leave with what I never knew. I'm someone to be loved. I'm someone to be loved. And that I learned from you.
Everywhere I turn, you are there. Everywhere I look, things are different. Everything seems right. Everything seems possible. Every moment bursts with feeling. Why is love so easy to give and so hard to receive? But though I want to live, I now can leave with what I never knew.
So this is the section that is new music, right?
I believe so. At least that last little bit is, yeah.
Yeah, is that everywhere I turn, you are there. Everywhere I look, things are different. That's new, right? That's new music. I always second guess myself with that in Sondheim musicals, because I'm like, that's new, and someone will be like, actually, that's the incidental music for between verses 2 and 3 of this song.
Here's the thing, that probably is also true.
Yeah,
but I think this is the new part. Yes.
Yeah, this is what we were talking about earlier. Of she has now sort of a confidence and a pride and, I mean, ego in a healthy way of she's got self-respect now. And I say a lot of times, especially in art, but in life as well, like, people are very judgmental of other people's journeys towards healthiness. And it's like, as if they get to his place of good, why does it matter how they got there? As long as it didn't harm or kill anybody else.
Right.
The journey they personally went on, like, why does it matter? So I'm sure there are people out there who are like, ugh, Fosca only found self-respect when she had the love of a man. I'm like, for her journey, that's what she needed. Yeah. And I do like that she has that now. And I feel like it's the one positive thing to come out of everything that happened in the show, is somebody understanding that, like, to love and be loved is a very beautiful thing, and it doesn't always work out, and it doesn't always make you feel good, but when it can make you feel good, it does wonders for your soul.
It's very Moulin Rouge. Yes
1000%. It's why is love so easy to give and so hard to receive? I'm sure there are many people who interpret that line differently. I always interpret it as like, when I've only been in love twice in my life, and like the second time was like really, really hard love. Like it was fast. It was, and I talk about it this way just because, like, after the fact, I look on it and I am so sure of how I felt, and I cannot tell you that I trust how he felt. And that is for me what that line means of like, when I tell someone I love them, like I am so sure of my feeling of it. And when someone tells me that they love me, in the moment I can believe it, but the moment I walk away, I go, I don't know if I believe that anymore. And it was a kind of feeling of, I was so happy with them, and the moment we would have to separate, or if we like stopped talking for the day, I got very upset and very sad. And that's not sustainable. And in some ways that is its own form of obsession. It's why people kind of keep coming back and staying in with people, or trying to find the person to give them that high of just like being so infatuated with somebody, and the feeling that they give them of like, you're just as infatuated with me. And I think it's easier for people like myself and Fosca to give ourselves over for that high than accept it from someone else for that high. It's sort of like a gift that you don't trust. As
someone who also identifies with Fosca, and also was what can only be described as being a late bloomer, I often get into that space too, which is like, there is so much in relationships that I want to give and like be there, and then when I get that in return, it's like, I don't think so. This feels like a trap, or like you're trying to set me up for something, right? It's like you can't take it when it's reciprocated back to you sometimes.
Yeah, there's something about, not everyone has this, but enough of us have this that I know I'm not alone in this. Of, if part of my brain goes, oh, if you love me, something must be wrong with you. Because like either something's wrong with you, or you haven't fully gotten to know me yet. That is a weird form of kicking ourselves that we shouldn't be doing. But also like sometimes, and it's not that it's true, but like sometimes just events happen to you out in the world, and people happen to you. And if it happens enough times, part of you starts to think like, is that true? Like, no one's here to listen to my whole romantic history, but hey, we're talking about passion, Kyle, so buckle up. But I mean, in between the two people I've said I love you to, and after the person I last said I love you to, I definitely had a string of encounters where I went on dates. Sometimes I didn't connect, sometimes I did. I would try really hard to like be my best self and get to know somebody and give them the benefit of the doubt and give time, only for, after like date 2 or 3 to get a complete ghosting, or to have it be like pulling teeth to get them to respond to me. And this is also more, a comment on other people. But when it happens enough times, I start to ask myself, like, am I unlovable? Am I somebody who like,
am I just a ghostable person? Is this just
like am I somebody who is so like, when you actually spend more time with me, you like me less? Or is it like, am I somebody who, and listen, there are days I look in the mirror and I go, oh yeah, I'm a pretty girl. But then I also have days where I'm like, I'm not fucking Matt Bomber. And yet I'll have people where it's like, they'll wine and dine for 2 dates. And then if we do end up sort of hooking up, like total ghost town. And I'm like, I am so I'm like, I'm not Matt Bomber. And yet sometimes that's all people want. And so again, like when I have someone like my last love, Bub, we shall call him, which is what we call him on the podcast. Part of me at the time like didn't trust it, because I was like, history has proven that I am not someone who's worthy of accepting this. And then wouldn't you know it, when everything sort of fell apart with us due to many circumstances, I sort of walked away from that being like, I was right the first time. Like when someone says I love you, I don't trust it because it's not real, and they go away and I'm left with my true feelings. And that is sort of what happened with Fosca in the first half of the play, right? As we learn from her flashback. And how long was that episode you did on her flashback?
It was like an hour and a half talking about that flashback.
Yeah, I mean, well, you got to talk about the Dalmatians, but
yeah, it was like 15 minutes on those Dalmatians. We had to talk about them.
I mean, it's just such a specific detail. It's like he's got a wife, a son, and 2 Dalmatians, and it's like, he's got everything.
Actually, so fun fact, the lyric is that he has them in Dalmatia, so it's not even Dalmatians. He lives where the dog was bred. Isn't that wild? Anyways,
that is wild.
I've always heard Dalmatians too. That's why
we all have heard Dalmatians. We all Mandela affected that. But the point is, with that story with Fosca, you're like, oh, so she puts her heart on the line, thinks that she's in love. Someone tells her that he loves her, and doesn't just ghost her. Like, does the most mentally abusive thing you can do to someone in terms of a romance, of telling them to their face, this was all a lie. You should have known it was a lie. And like, it's like, I don't even have enough respect for you as a human being to, soften the blow. I'm just going to tell you right up front what all of this was. So that plus how the world continues to treat her tells her who she is and what she should be and how she should be treated, and which ultimately is what creates the personality that we come to know for the show. And it's this moment in this, I'm someone to be loved and that I learned from you. It's a beautiful lyric, and one that maybe it doesn't absolve her of everything she's done, but it at least breaks her hardened shell a bit. And again, gives her a sense of self-respect. And it is a hard truth to know, because when people say I am deserving of love, it's this like mantra that they'll say to themselves to kind of, eventually believe it and try and get that love. And then so many times when somebody comes along who's like, no, I like you, I see you, I would like to be with you, those same people who say I deserve love don't trust it.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Yeah. It's like, it's either it's a no, thank you, or it's like, what's going on here? What's the angle? Like when's the other shoe going to drop? And in this case, this is like right before she dies. As far as Fosca's aware, with Giorgio, he loved her and she died just in just enough time that there was no shoe to drop.
Well, I mean, that's the other thing too, like in real world relationships that I've just had to, I guess this is the story I tell myself, is that the people, not necessarily the ghosters, but the people who do be like, oh, I don't know, like either moving too fast or all the other excuses that people have is like, okay, like, I mean, everyone has to arrive at the ability to receive love at their own speeds type of thing.
Yeah.
And I have to remember that there are people too. So sometimes we get wrapped up in how we feel and how we internalize everything and like the work that we've done in ourselves to get to the point that we're at currently. It's like, well, maybe they're just not, maybe this other person just isn't there yet. And they're still like rejecting love being given to them.
I've definitely been there myself. I've been with other guys where it's the same thing of there is a third person in my life where I'm not going to say love because we didn't get that far. This was actually somebody who I was actually very good about protecting my own self this one time, Kyle. And it was in between the two men I said I love you to. It went very slowly with us and it was going really well. Everything was good. And he absolutely retreated and was very cold about it. And enough time has now passed and since him had my heart like genuinely broken that I look at this guy and I'm like, and my opinion of him has shifted so much that we do talk sometimes, but it's not with a let's go out, let's date or anything like that. It's just it's both of us being like, we both know what happened between us and we know why, which was that you got scared and you hadn't done enough work on yourself to be in this, because I've been there my own self. But I'm like, I'm not gonna we won't ignore it necessarily, but we just won't talk about it. I'm not gonna act like you didn't do what you did. And it's also, but I am not gonna put your feet to the was it feet to the fire, hands to the fire,
feet to the flame. Actually,
I'm not gonna hold your feet to the flame, because I get it. I've been there, and like I'm hoping that you're now on a journey where you can accept the kindness and affection that someone's showing you. But yeah,
people are complicated, aren't they?
Yeah, people are complicated, and love is just such a fucking weird thing that has no shape, it has no tangible elements to it, and everyone interprets it differently. Like, we know people talk about love language. What's your love language? And it's so weird for something that everyone's supposed to feel. It's like, what do you mean? What's my love language? Like, shouldn't we all speak it the same way? And yet we don't. Like,
we don't.
There are so many different verbal languages in the world, but they all will mean the same thing. So like we all point to a table and we call it a different thing, but that's a table. And so when we talk about love language, it's like, oh, he did the dishes for me, or oh, she picked me up at the airport, or oh, he texted me on my birthday. And to many different people, it's like, well, that's love. And it's like, is it? Or some people, it's like, oh, well, we have amazing sex and that's love. I'm like, I guess to you it is, but it's so weird that like we both can point at a table and you go chair.
Well, this is also, I mean, this is going to devolve into like old man yelling at cloud territory, I'm afraid. But like, so it's like, I don't think every bad thing is because of social media, but there is this one aspect of, I think we get so caught up in like the idealized version that's broadcast to us 24/7 that we can constantly scroll through and see all these quote unquote perfect relationships that are, made for the camera sort of thing. That any time it's like, well, actually, or at least I'll speak for myself, any long-term relationship that's healthy that I've observed, both of those people will tell you, yeah, it's work. It shouldn't be like shoveling coal every day, hard work, but it's like, there's good days, bad days, but we are both committed to making this be something that's long-term. It's not just all rainbows every single day of our existence.
Yeah, I'm having deja vu. I know for a fact we had this conversation on an episode at some point. I want to say it was Sunday in the Park with George, but like, don't quote me on this. We've done so many of these at this point, and I've gone on so many tangents that like, I'm sure I had a whole tangent about Grey's Anatomy at some point for all I know. But no, like, I have seen so many different relationships come and go in my life, like through my friends, through my family, all that stuff. There is no fully right way to have a healthy relationship. There's like no one way where you go, that's the way to do it. There are certain touchstones that I think people need to understand. Like, being in a relationship is ultimately a choice, but it's a choice that shouldn't be too difficult to make. Like, doing work on the relationship is a choice, but that shouldn't be like, oh God, how much, the moment you're going like, how much work should I do right now? That's when maybe you should reconsider what the relationship is. And if it's work every day, maybe you should reconsider, because like it is work in the sense that you are committing to each other, you're accommodating each other, you are growing with another person who is also growing, and you might be growing into different people. And you need to accommodate each other and understand each other, because ultimately you're choosing to go through life together, and you're not gonna like each other every day. And sometimes the love might be hard to find some days, but like ultimately you should be able to find your way back to it without having to give up your whole self or give up too much of what you want or what you need. And same thing for them, right? Sondheim has talked about with passion that like people would come to him and say, is this what you're saying love is? Like, oh, Fosca was the right choice, and like, oh, this is what people should do with love. And he's like, and where in the show did I have the cast turn to the audience and go, and this is love, and if this is not what you have, then you should go kill yourself? Like, Sondheim has never really been an artist who is like, and here's the message. He's always been about character, and he's always been about story. And a lot of things that characters in these stories will say resonate with so many of us because there's a lot of truth to it, because it's so human. But with passion, it's not as if Fosca's the correct choice, but there is something to be found in how she feels about Giorgio. There's something to be found in how Clara feels about Giorgio. There's something to be found in how Giorgio feels about both of them, right? Like, love should not be so all-consuming that you end up in a mental hospital.
Right.
Love should not be so euphoric that you can ignore all of the red flags because the joy is so intoxicating. Like with Clara, you should not have to give up all of yourself to be with someone, but like there is a sense of giving up a bit of your ego to be with someone. Like, so it's when people say like, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? Like, sometimes when you're in an argument, it's like if you're getting to a breaking point and it's so important to you that you quote unquote win the argument, then what's the point of having a partnership? It's why so many, I really don't want to throw all my straight friends under the bus, but I just know a lot of straight couples who refer to themselves as each other's partners when they're married, or like, when they've been together for a long time and haven't gotten married yet. And I'm like, I get it in theory. You want, like, you're trying to drive home the fact that like you're in this together, but at the same time, no. But that's my own sense of hetero hatred.
First of all, that's our word. Second, no.
But it's more that word got co-opted when we couldn't get married for so long, and maybe won't be able to get married later. But so like it's definitely people I know who, there's a difference between people who are like, we're not husband and wife because we're not legally married, but we've been together so long I can't be like, it's my boyfriend. And so it's like, they're my partner, they're the person I'm in this with together. And I'm like, totally get it. And then I know people who are like, we're not each other's properties, we're each other's partners. I'm like, okay, you can go jump in the river. Because like in a way, like you have sort of branded each other with your own names. Like when you've decided to be with each other, it's like in a way you are belonging to each other. Not in a sense of I own you, but just like you're tethered to each other. That's part of the decision, right?
Mm-hmm. It's true. This song ends here, which is just a lot of repeating. I should just say that the whole company has now kind of come out behind these two, and they say, I don't know how I let you so far inside my mind, but there you are, and there you will stay. How could I ever wish you away? I see now I was blind, and should you die tomorrow, another thing I see. And Giorgio says, your love will live in me, and then other people will sing that 10 more times.
I don't know how I let you so far inside my mind, but there you are and there you will stay. How could I ever wish you away? I see now I was blind.
And should you die tomorrow, another thing I see.
Your love will live in me.
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 Your love will live in me. Your love will live in me. Your love will live in me.
Your love will live in me.
Your love will live in me.
Your love will live in me.
Your love will live in me.
Until that final dissonant note that feels so unresolved.
That's right. That's right.
This was the moment in the Tony performance that I went, oh, that's beautiful. The lyrics, as well as just like the giant harmony, and going into Fosca's "And should you die tomorrow." It's so interesting how they ended with this part, because as we know in the letter, in the "I wish I could forget you," that song is a manipulation.
Right. Yeah. She's forcing him to write these words.
Yes. And telling him, I know you don't mean it, but it will help me. Can you please just write it to me? And it's such an interesting letter, because it is a perfect manipulation, because it is a letter saying like, I wish I could love you, but I don't. And like, I wish I could forget you. I can't, but like, that doesn't mean I love you. And I wish I could love you. And it's Fosca being like, I'm going to, I have enough in here that Giorgio can't get mad at me, but it's enough for me to kind of grab onto. And then it does end up becoming true, minus that I that doesn't mean I love you, but the idea of like, I can't get you out of me. And this is sort of what I talk about when I said like, when you choose a partnership, you're choosing to tether yourself to somebody in a lot of ways. And that shouldn't sound scary or condescending if it's a person who you're happy with, because ultimately you can't get them out of you. I don't know how I let you so far inside my mind, but there you are and there you will stay. It's like, well, yes, of course I'm going to marry you, because like you live in me. Like what am I going to do now? Like, this is, you're my person.
Yeah, there is that joining of the two people, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting. Your love will live in me. With Fosca, that's a beautiful, joyful lyric. And with Giorgio, it's kind of like a demonic mantra that will stay with him until he withers away. Because it goes into this like echoiness, right?
Not only that, but I mean, like when this part shows up earlier, like you said, like it's a very weird scene, because she's forcing him to write this letter. So it almost feels menacing then. And here now, it's almost like him wistfully thinking back on that. It's weird, a reversal or switch of emotions.
Yeah, it feels a bit of like a reminiscence that has a harsher, deeper meaning now than it did then.
Or it's like it's a demand at the beginning, and now it's just like a reality. I don't know how else to say this.
It's a simple truth.
Yeah.
And I think, and Sondheim has also said this, the earnesty of the show and the simplicity of its language made a lot of people uncomfortable, and still makes people uncomfortable. Like truth, like really just simple truth makes a lot of people uncomfortable.
Well, so much so that like, because this is coming out at a time, Passion, I mean, the original show is coming out at a time as the culture was very much swifting into like a more like ironic, we don't actually say what we feel type of mentality, which I don't know actually has ever swung back the other way fully. There is this ironic detachment that people still cling to, and being earnest does sometimes make people like a little bit nervous.
Yeah, it's when something earnest breaks through, it breaks through really hard. Something like a Heartstopper,
right,
or a Hades Town, or a Piazza. It breaks through and it really kind of sticks around. But that's a really hard balancing act to do. This was coming in 94, so like the rom-coms in film that were the most successful had a sweetness to them, but it was always sort of like I'm reluctantly falling in love with this person, or like I can't do that. I can't. I'm too busy and professional. I'm too smart for this. And then at the end, it's like, oh,
I'm a maid in Manhattan.
Get it? Because she's a maid in Manhattan, but she also has it made in Manhattan.
That's right.
But J-Lo. But the moment you're like, you know who we should get for a romantic lead in a comedy? Ray Fiennes. That's when you're like, fire that person. They don't know what they're talking about. Yeah, but like it's these romantic comedies like A Sleepless in Seattle, You've Got Mail, even a Clueless or a Never Been Kissed, where it's like I'm simply too I'm too smart. I am too confident to fall in love like this. And at the end of the movie, it's like, I am all of those things, but I did fall in love. And I mean, this is 2 years before Scream, which is the horror movie that goes like, we can never go back to Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street, where these kids have never seen a horror movie before. It's like, you now have to be smart. And then that means that the horror has to get smarter. Passion is a musical where the characters are intelligent, but it's ultimately, if there's one thing that Passion is saying, is like, you can be as intelligent as you want. Your emotions will overpower you and like will cloud your best judgment over and over again.
As far as like a wrap up of what Sondheim thinks about this show, he writes a little bit here in the book about basically decompressing the fact that there was so much violent reaction to this show in total. But he says, the violence of these reactions, however, strike me as an example of the lady doth protest too much. I think they may have identified with Fosca and Giorgio all too readily and uncomfortably. The idea of a love that's pure, that burns with D.H. Lawrence's gem-like flame, emanating from a source so gnarled and selfish, is hard to accept. Perhaps they were reacting to the realization that we were all Fosca, we were all Giorgio, we were all Clara, which, as far as I'm concerned, is what gives Tarquetti's stodgy novel and Scola's elegant movie such profound power. A little bit of a drive-by on the novel, but still, there's a...
And what's so fascinating is that Sondheim wanted to adapt the movie and Lapine wanted to adapt the novel. And so they, for two men who kind of came at it at different perspectives, like as far as Sondheim is concerned, he adapted the movie. And as far as Lapine is concerned, he adapted the novel.
Which, to be eminently fair, I can kind of understand Sondheim's reaction to the novel, because what you can now purchase and buy as far as the English translation goes was not available. They had to get some like academic translation done for them, which other people have told me like was pretty dry, just factual like translation without it giving a sense of what the language really felt like. So I kind of understand his reaction to this to a degree.
I will also say the thinking on the original Broadway production, there's different narratives from everybody, but like the story goes was that everyone agrees that the first week of previews were a disaster.
Yes.
And they didn't know what had gone wrong because it got such a rapturous reception at their workshop and Lincoln Center, and everyone was kind of not sure what to do. And ultimately, both Sondheim and Lapine say, like, you know, by the end of the second week, all the laughter had died because they spent that second week like pinpointing where laughter was and tweaking it. Sometimes it was cutting a line, sometimes it was redirecting how an actor would say it. But like by halfway through previews, the laughter had subsided and the show was like kind of starting to work. And at the last week, everything kind of fell into place and ended up getting mostly solid reviews and did well at the Tonys. But like I think it still holds the record for the shortest run of a Best Musical winner.
I believe you're right. Yeah. But I've also heard too, like throughout that preview period. See, this is where I don't know who to believe necessarily, because it was like, apparently audiences would behave better if Sondheim was in the audience versus not in the audience. So I don't know. There's all these like conflicting emotions and stuff.
Yeah,
about, like, and then other people who I've talked to later on the show who did see that original production was like, yeah, it was a little overblown, or like, yeah, sometimes the audiences weren't good. So I think it just really depended on the night.
Yeah, I think people always want to look for a reason, and you can't ever think of a reason when it comes to audiences, because I think it's the commentary that, because Sondheim actually felt that audiences would be worse behaved when they knew he was there, because in his mind, like the theater queens wanted him to know what they thought. And then like Donna and Marin on the commentary, like, no, they were worse when you weren't there. Like when you were there, they were very well behaved. So it's everyone has different perspectives, but the general understanding was like the first week or so, they were bad, and it got better over time. And I'm sure there would still be a performance or two throughout the run where an audience would be bad, but the narrative that like it was a disaster until it opened and then all of a sudden everybody changed their tune isn't totally accurate either.
Right.
Like they worked on it, and then over time its reputation has grown, and I feel like in America it was the Kennedy Center production where everyone went, oh, we might have slept on this a bit more than we should have. And I think what actually did that for me is Michael Cerveris is a much more dominant presence in that production than Jerry Shea was. I mean, granted, I wish I could see Thaxton because Sondheim calls that like the ultimate Giorgio, but Kunze's Fosca is funny. She gets actual intentional laughs in that passion, and I think that helps actually endear her to an audience a bit, because humor is in its own way a sign of intelligence. Wit is a sign of intelligence, and it also, again, it can break tension. It can also lure an audience in. If something is just harsh and cold and dense off the bat, an audience gets very resentful. They're like, why are you making me work so hard immediately? Can't you give an inch? And I think if you find places to give an audience an inch for passion, they will warm up to it more, because an audience will work if you give them a break from time to time. And I feel like with the Kennedy Center production, there are moments where the audience does get a break. It's not a perfect production, but like when Giorgio comes back from his sex weekend with Clara and he sits down with Fosca and she basically's like, did you enjoy your trip? How was my arrival? Like, she's so dry and she's so pissed the fuck off, and the audience is living for it. And I'm like, that's kind of the way in, because, and granted, like, you don't, it takes other performances to eventually influence new performances. So like Donna was the mold, and she had no one really to go off if she just had the movie. So she's doing this very earnest operatic performance, and that can be a major turnoff to people, especially for something that's not really an opera and has moments where there could be humor. But like when you play everything so earnest, and not just her, but like all of that production, when you play everything so straight and so intense, things that could possibly be funny but aren't played as funny, an audience doesn't know what to do with it. So then there becomes uncomfortable laughter. Yeah,
there's definitely different types of laughter, and some can be good and some can be harmful to the show overall.
I think with that original production, everyone on board from like the top to the bottom, I think they just went a little too hard in that direction. And I wish that they hadn't stuck to their guns of like, no, this is sincere romance and you will like and appreciate it. And like just sort of took a moment to go, let's find places to give them an inch so they can then invest in the rest of it.
I think the more I've looked into this, where I'm coming down on is, a lot of people will call this like the last Sondheim masterpiece, and I'm almost there. But I think it's like that in despite of itself, because you have the two main creators who think they're making two different shows.
Yeah.
And somehow it still kind of works or ends up working if you get the right actors.
It's definitely the last for me worthwhile Sondheim. And by that, I mean, I think pretty much everything Sondheim did from 1970 to 1994 is worthwhile, if not necessarily a masterpiece.
Right.
And I don't trust anyone that will tell you that everything that Sondheim did was genius. Like, if have you done the Frogs yet? Are you going to do the Frogs?
We did these 2 or 3 bonus episodes on the Frogs.
Okay. That is one where I'm just like, I'm sorry, but no. Everything he did for
there's got like a couple 2 songs from the Frogs I do enjoy, and then some of it I actively find annoying, to be perfectly frank.
I like the Invocation. I do like a lot of the choral work, but pretty much everything he wrote for the Lincoln Center production, I think, is bottom of the barrel for him, and he agreed with me on that. So like, not that his opinion is God, but so much as I'm like, I just know people, and I read opinions of people all the time who work so hard to justify everything he's ever done as being perfect. And I'm just like, well, you actually lack discernment for me then, because not everything he did was perfect. He was a man and we're all human, and he was an artist and he took big swings, and he tried to be as meticulous as he was, but that doesn't mean everything he did worked. And sometimes not everything he did is going to work for you. And so with Passion, I do actually think a lot of it works, and more of it works for me each time I come back to it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's that I relate to so much of this stuff now that actually it keeps me from falling deeply in love with it, that I'm like too afraid to let myself be engulfed in it. But I think because of especially the experiences I had in the last like 3 years, I understand it to a degree now where I can unequivocally say that it is worthwhile.
In a way, the show itself is like Fosca, and it's like, your lover is going to live in me. And then it's like, okay, fine.
Yeah. It's like, oh my God, fine, I'll do it. You can live in me. But yeah, but I do love that line, because it is a double-edged sword. With Fosca, it's a promise, and with Giorgio, it sort of feels like a threat. It ends up giving her light before she dies, and it gives him darkness as he lives. And it's that idea of, I love you so much and it's fucking ruining me.
Yeah.
I don't feel good about it. It becomes an obsession, it becomes an infatuation, and it becomes a sickness. Not everyone can have like strolling through the meadow in the sunlight in their sundress, like, I'm in love and it's great. Like, some people, it's like Notes from the Underground, where you are holed up in your room and you're just thinking over and over again about like the one person you care about and like how fucking awful it is. And like, and also I think with love, again, because it's not super intellectual, it's like, why you? Why does it have to be you? Can't it be someone like, I wish I could love someone easier and someone who is more at peace, but for some reason, my heart is over to you.
Yeah, right. As just a small digression, talking about criticizing things that Sondheim has written. And I say this with love. People can absolutely keep writing in. You should have seen my inbox when I said how much I disliked the dog sequence in The Day Off, because I actively disliked that portion. There's a lot of fans out there that really like the dogs.
Day Off, Hive, Rise Up. That was always the number that I feel like even the biggest Sunday fans, we all were in agreement of, like, if there's one skippable track, it's The Day Off. And The Day Off is a number that I have no problem watching. That's the other thing, is Sondheim didn't necessarily write his scores for like easy at home listening. Like and it wasn't as if he was like, oh, I want to write the most complex thing, but he wrote a score that was meant to be part of a story that was meant to be experienced. And some people have been able to do that and create a beautiful listening experience. It's one of the things that he always admired about Rodgers and Hammerstein, of like, he always admired how they were able to use reprises dramatically well that then could just sort of sell the single on the radio. But I think Sondheim has scores that do that as well. But like, if I'm listening to Sunday in the Park with George, I'm skipping Day Off. I'm going straight from Gossip to Everybody Loves Louie.
Sorry, everyone. Me too. I can't do it.
And it's fine. Like, people can defend it, but like, to be angry about it, I'm just like, to quote Karen Walker on Will and Grace, and I say this with love to everyone, you can be passionate about things, but sometimes you just need to get a life. And you can and you can go, and I just go, no, get a life. Get a life. Right. That's not something to die over. That's something you can be like, here's something I love about The Day Off. I hope you think about it for your next episode. But it's like, flood your inbox with hate. My God. Touch grass, everybody.
Okay, one last thing we're going to do before we do the last question. I usually try and do this on the final episode, which I play a little game called Guess the Tonys. And there'll be some little music that just played there underneath, little game show music. You'll probably do, or possibly will do very well at this, the Tony savant that you are. My first question is this. It looks like to me that it's only the original production that has ever been nominated. I don't think any of the other productions were eligible.
They were not. There's only been one other New York production, and it was off Broadway. Yeah.
So for the original production, how many Tonys was Passion nominated for?
I'm going to say 10.
Ding, ding, ding. You win. Woo. Yes, it is 10 on the nose. Do you recall how many it won?
Oh, it won 4. I can tell you that for sure. Yeah.
For bonus points, which 4 did they win?
They won musical, score, book, and actress in a musical.
That is correct. Yes. The other awards were Best Actor, Best Featured Actor, Best Featured Actress for Marin Mazzie. Best Direction, which they lost.
So I think it's I'm a freak for this year because this is the carousel year. So I think I can even tell you what each award they lost to.
Yeah, because in costume design, lighting design were the other two that they lose.
So costume design, they lose to Beauty and the Beast. Lighting design, I think they lose to An Inspector Calls, because that was back when design was a combo of plays and musicals. They didn't separate it until the 2000s. Director, they lose to Nick Heitner for Carousel. Woo woo. They lose featured actress to Audra Ann McDonald for Carousel. Woo.
Yeah.
They lose featured actor to Jared Emick for Damn Yankees, and they lose actor to Boyd Gaines and She Loves Me.
Cool. I think you're right. I was trying to do some verification as you were going through there, but it looks like all the ones I'm double checking here are correct. What did you say for Best Featured Actress?
Marin lost to Audra Ann McDonald for Carousel.
Yes, you're correct. Yes.
I had to say the full name because she was still Audra Ann back then.
Who, by the way, we're recording this. My schedule is so out of whack here now that I don't know if this is coming out before or after the Tony Awards. But Audra McDonald is now the most nominated actress in Tony history. So.
Most nominated performer of all time, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so for the final question, what I've been asking every single person, because the show is called Passion, you can take this in any direction you want. Obviously, this is the show is about a romantic passion, but that's not what really this question is about. I'm asking you what you are currently the most passionate about.
Oh, God. So I knew this question was coming. Like I said, I haven't listened to every episode of the series, but I did listen to enough to know that this was the final question. And I spent most of the week thinking what I would answer, and I couldn't think of anything. And then this morning I tried to think and I couldn't think of anything. What am I most passionate about? I want to give a real answer. I don't want to be like, I'm passionate about bagels. Right now, I think I'm passionate about balance, finding a balance for ourselves of work, play, and betterment, of finding time to recharge your batteries, finding time to be with others, finding time to be productive, and finding time to make good in the world and challenge the norm. You can't do all four all the time always, and give yourself a little grace if you are struggling with any of those plates spinning. It's very hard. But I'm also passionate about just bettering ourselves in general, of understanding that we're not finished and acknowledging when we're wrong, acknowledging when we've hurt someone, and doing better.
I don't know.
That's what I'm passionate about.
Our culture seems that pointing fingers seems to work better. So
people love to point fingers, and they love to be the one with all of the knowledge. And granted, I did have all the knowledge for that Tony section, but I'm sure I misquoted something. I'm sure I did something wrong in this episode. And if someone wants to tell me, fantastic. I ask that you tell me in a way that is not pointing a finger and just like, hey, I happen to have information that you were missing. Here you go. Right. Like, yeah, if I have information, I like to give it in a way because I enjoy all of us learning, and I like to learn too. So I'm also passionate about learning as well, Kyle.
That was like I think you've said this on your podcast before, but I'm also this way, which is I'm never the person who's like, oh my God, you haven't seen this thing. I'm like, oh, I'm so excited you get to experience this thing for the first time. That's such a cool experience to have. I've
been now told by a few friends that Working Girl is a movie I can no longer show friends, because it's one of my favorite movies, and I get so excited when someone I know hasn't seen it that when we're watching it, I'm watching them watch it.
Just staring at the person.
And they're like, it's not fun because you're watching us seeing what our response is to all of your favorite moments. I'm like, I just want to share it with you. They're like, well, they're like, you'll lend me the DVD and I'll watch it. You can't sit there and watch me watch it.
Yeah. Matt, thank you so much for joining me here today. If people wanted to follow you, see what you're up to, what is the easiest way to do so online?
First of all, thank you again for having me, Kyle. I love this podcast, and I love everything you do on this podcast. And your voice is so soothing and calm. I'm sure people tell you all the time.
It's because I'm sick. That's why.
No, you get told you have dulcet tones all the time. I get told by people on the Discord for my podcast, they're like, When's Kyle coming back? They're
really?
like, baby, that voice.
Can I tell you this? And I was not actually going to even bring this up because you just did. I have been thinking, like, should I join the Discord? Mostly because I'm an old, and I was like, I don't know if there's another thing I want to add into my life, but
it's not something you have to do all the time, but I'll say it is a fun Discord. We have almost 300 members on it right now, and it's pretty active, and everyone's very respectful of each other. We got a lot of funny people. The one downside to the Discord. So this is okay. This is to say, I have a podcast. It's called Broadway Breakdown. You can find it wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find me on Instagram, Matt Koplik. Kyle will spell it correctly on the episode, I'm sure. Right. My podcast has a Discord channel, which you can find links to that in any of the description boxes for my podcast. The problem with Discord is I set the links to never expire, and then Discord goes, no, we're going to expire it anyway. So I have to constantly post new links. But the one caveat to the Discord, and this is a me thing, is every time I record, and I'm sure you're the same way, I forget 95% of
yeah, like literally. It's like, what did I talk about? I don't know.
Exactly. And I also edit now where it's to hold me accountable when I'm recording to not go into any tangents and make sure that if the episode's going to be 3 hours long, like it's going to be 3 hours long about the subject. So I don't actually edit as much as I used to. So I don't even like listen back and hear it a second time, but I'll post it, and then people will write down quotes on the Discord, and I'm like, who are you quoting? And they're like, you said that. It's like, so I had a Tony episode recently, and someone posted like a meme they did of Gray Henson with something that I think was a quote from me, but I have no idea what the quote was referencing. And I'm too embarrassed to write in the Discord, what's this regarding?
Yeah.
What did I say? Who said this?
I'm very quotable anyway, so I mean, I'm not very quotable. I'm not surprised, but
no, you are very quotable. You'd have a great time in the Discord. Just pop in. People like you. They enjoy.
Sure.
Right. We have a couple of past guests in the Discord channel as well. So yeah, you would just be joining the ranks of the elite on there.
Right. All right. That's fun.
Yeah. Well, so that's that. And again, I don't know when this is coming out, but if it's after the Tonys, all my Tony Award coverage will be done by then. But I've been doing a lot of it. And if it's before the Tonys, make sure to listen to my coverage because I'll help you win your Tony pool.
I was surprised by a couple of the nominations that came out when I read it. Nothing super, super crazy, but there were a couple people like, oh, I thought for sure they would be nominated, and then they just weren't.
there were a couple who I expected and didn't get it, and there were people that I expected and did get it, and I wasn't thrilled about it, but It was maybe like this was always going to happen. Having now seen everything this season, I will say it's actually not a bad batch of nominees. Do I have some people that I would switch out? 1000%. But there is nothing in the nominations this year where I'm like, the flying hell. How did this happen over this? I'm like, I get how that happened. That's not the worst thing I've ever seen.
As a entirety of a Broadway season, are you saying strong, medium, poor? Like, how would you rate like the entire season?
Medium to strong. Better than last season. I will say both last season and this season, the plays have been better than the musicals still. But the musicals have stepped it up a bit more this season than last year. It's people who are saying like, oh my God, embarrassment of riches with musicals this season. I'm like, we can argue over that. But there's been some good stuff. There's definitely been some good stuff.
Cool. All right. Well, I look forward to watching the telecast, listening to your reactions to it.
Well, thank you.
I'm sure you'll talk again. I have to have like 30 people on to talk about Roadshow or however we want to call that show.
Is that the next one, Roadshow?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Because you let me pick this one, you can pick where you want me for Roadshow, Daddy.
Sure. Okay. I still have no idea how I'm going to structure that season, to be honest. So that's my job now.
Because it's Roadshow and Bounce, right?
And Bounce and Wise Guys. It's changed like so many different times.
Yeah, but there's no official recording of Wise Guys, right? Okay.
Well, then I can just worry about.
I think you get away with just Bounce and Roadshow. Maybe go back and forth. Do like an if then sliding doors situation.
That's what I kind of want to do, is like go back and forth between the two of them.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Anyway, also I realized I've never actually done this on the podcast with you before, but I've never referred to you as Keel, like on South Park.
Yeah,
so I need to say that one more time before, because I don't know the next time I'll be on. So thank you so much for having me, Keel.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening. You can send emails to puttingittogetherpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow me at The Kyle Marshall on Instagram. This is an independent production, and you can support the show on Patreon by going to patreon.com/puttingittogetherpodcast. Putting Together is available on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and pretty much anywhere you can get podcasts from. Consider subscribing so that you never miss an episode. We'll have some episodes throughout the rest of the summer, before getting into our new season on Saturday nights, and then figuring out how we're going to be doing Bounce/Roadshow. So have a great summer, everyone. Remember that my love lives in you. As always, a big thank you to the great Chris Taniguchi, who designed the podcast artwork, and Nick Driscoll for composing our theme music. Well, we've reached the end of our episode. Yes, I know. Goodbye for now.